Welcome to the High Tech Freedom Podcast. This is a podcast where we bring successful tech sales professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs to share best practices, insights, and lessons learned with other tech sales professionals. As a sales professional, the more we learn, the more we earn. Once we earn it, how can we put those hard-earned commission dollars back to work to build additional income streams that will create the freedom we are all working to achieve? I'm your host, Chris Freeman. I'm a high-tech sales leader, real estate investor, and lifetime learner. All right, welcome back to the High Tech Freedom Sales Podcast. So my guest today, Glenn Poulos, is the co-founder and vice president and general manager of Gap Wireless. And I'm really excited to bring him on today because he has decades of experience in sales, running a business, building strategy, taking that strategy and driving it down through the sales organization. And for the little bit of time that I've been able to get to know Glenn, I really, even though he's been a business owner, an entrepreneur, he has a sales first mentality because, as you know, in this world, nothing happens until somebody sells something. So Glenn, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. It's so funny what you say about nothing happens until something gets sold. I mean, I don't know how many times a week I say that. Yeah. And so that definitely resonates with me. So,
well, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess depends how you look at it. My family also tells me the same thing. So, Dad, nothing happens until you sell something.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, Glenn, why don't we start off with a little bit of your background in sales, just to set the stage.
I work, believe it or not, coming out of college, I was a public servant, a federal civil servant, what they call working for the Canadian government. And I had a high technology diploma in electronics, and I worked for the Environment Canada fixing electronic stuff, right? And my boss pulled me aside and said, you got the wrong personality for the government. You need to go into sales, right? So I took him at his word, and I went and got a job in sales. And it was really the first company I applied for, and I basically harassed the owner until he hired me. And he said, "Geez, if you're gonna hassle me that much to get the job, I can imagine what you'll do to keep the job." And so he took a chance on me, and I didn't have any experience, obviously. And I worked with them for about 5 years, learning, selling companies from around the world products in Canada. Right? We were, their local Canadian company representative that we sold to them, right? Distributor. And after about 5 years, I realized that there was a big difference between the leverage that a salesman had and an owner had, right? A salesman can leverage his territory, and repeat customers and things like that. But an owner leverages everybody's territory and, and customers and what have you, right? And so as a salesman, you get paid when you sell something. As the owner, you get paid when everyone sells something. And I realized it was really key. This is a perfect opportunity. I had this like little entrepreneurial bug that was just gnawing away at me. And so I wanted to do it by the time I hit 30. So after about 5 years, I approached them to spin off a part of their technology that they were selling the products into a specific, dedicated silo, and that I would own it and they would own a bit of it. And I would get to be an entrepreneur and I would get to be an owner. They would be an owner. And they said, no, I don't think it'll work. And you should just stay what you're doing. And so I quit. And I'd only been married for 6 days. I just up and quit the next day. I forgot to tell my wife, went home and said, oh, by the way, honey, I quit. And she's like, wait a minute, didn't we just get married? And started a business, and it was based on this newfangled technology, which they didn't think was going to go anywhere, which is the cell phone. And of course, that didn't turn out to be much of anything, right? Like, who needs a cell phone, right? And this was in 1991, right? So, and I was starting a company based on mobile wireless technology, and it was quite a different landscape back there. Most of the phones were still, bolted into your car or in a giant Motorola bag or something like that, right?
I had one.
Yep. And I ran a company for quite a number of years, 15 years, and sold it to a public company. That public company ended up basically, that company that owned my company that they bought went bankrupt, and it brought down all of the subsidiaries. And all the shares they'd given me for my business sort of went to zero. And in 2007, I went from multi-millionaire on paper to broke and had to start over and started a new company, had to start either get a job or start a new business. So I decided that it was easier to start a company than it was to get a job. And so based on some of the lessons in the business that I had run, I decided I was going to do it again, do it a bit differently, and started a new company, which I ran for 15 years. And then I sold it to a U.S. private equity last year. And now I work for them as, their manager in Canada, running their Canadian operation.
Wow.
That's how I got here.
What a journey. What a journey. Well, so you, so a lot of experience, and I'm sure you've got a pile of lessons learned along the way. And I'm just going to assume that probably prompted a little bit of you writing a book that you released last year.
Yeah.
Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow Business and Build a Career in Selling. What motivated you? It sounds like you're plenty busy. What motivated you to write a book?
So the basis of the book was when I was, on the road selling where, a bag carrying sales guy, I started watching what people were doing that were getting a lot of orders and stuff. And I started sort of copying them. And then I would realize they would be doing things repetitively. And so I started writing them down and naming them after them. And, and I was able to develop sort of, in some cases, funny anecdotes or like sort of lessons to do or to avoid and things like that. And then I started like sharing them and calling them these factors, right? And, and people would laugh and eventually, other salespeople that knew me said, "Hey, can you come to our company and share some of those factors and things like that?" Right. And, so I did that for a while, and then people were like, "Well, you should write a book." And of course I never did. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. And I thought, and it had always been, sort of needling away at the back of my mind, like, "Oh, you got to write a book," and, bucket list kind of a thing. And I thought, what better time now? In Canada, we were like really locked down. And we didn't go anywhere for almost 2 years, right? And nothing to do at night, nothing to do on the weekends. So I decided, hey, let's buckle down and get all those rules and put them into a book and get them out there, right? And so I started in about 9 months, I think it was, before February 2022, and that's about how long it took me to get it written, edited, and published. So
yeah, we'll have to check it out. I think, a lot of salespeople that I've met, they know things that they should be doing, but sometimes you get so busy, you get head down, you're deep in the trenches of a deal. And I love those little reminders that maybe are story related, because that's the things that keep it memorable.
Right.
That, kind of help you remember to go, "Oh yeah, let's reinforce that. Let's go do that."
Right.
So Glenn, really, really successful career. You've been exposed to a lot of salespeople, successfully, obviously, clearly successful, because even when you go from being the sales rep to being the owner, your owner is your chief sales officer, right? They're the biggest cheerleader for the company. So you worked many hours, over your career. What have you seen that the top 10, 20% of sales reps and sales professionals do that really sets them apart from the rest of the pack?
Good question. So some of the things that jump out at me, a good knowledge of the products, but not so deep that they're the application engineer. And I talk about that in the chapter called greed-based learning, which we can leverage off in a minute, because there's other top 10, criteria I want to, so, knowing just enough about each product so that you can sound intelligent on your feet and not be stumbling, right? And but more in terms of the habits and things would be things like, a strong and consistent communication skill and style, right? Like the way you communicate. And I mean, I often attribute it to being like an actor, right? Like, you show up at a customer and you could have had just a massive fight with your wife, right? And, you could be borderline in tears or something. But the moment you hit that lobby, of course, the title of my book is Never Sit in the Lobby. So don't sit down, right? But you got to basically pretend you're acting in a movie and you're getting paid to play a part, and the part is salesman, right? And so, you want to be strong communication skills and style and be consistent, right? The other thing I see is the guys that really stand out, and girls, of course. We have actually our top performer, actually, is a lady right now, and is managing your time well, and I don't mean like, it's not like rocket science, but I mean, they're consistent about managing their time, where these days I'm on the road, they limit their office time. and they use every minute sort of to their advantage. But it doesn't mean they're working every minute, right? They're just very effective with their time. They talk about always be closing. I'm like, always be prospecting, right? Like I always try to find, like whenever I'm at a customer, my next trip to the customer is always set before I leave that customer, right? I don't have to follow up with them later to get it back in there because, well, the building's filled with the way we are with selling high technology products and things. There's usually more than one guy in a building who's talked to us about our stuff. So I'm like, hey, can you drop me by so-and-so's desk or whatever? And then you go there and he says, oh, I'm busy. I'm like, oh, I'm back next Thursday. Can I drop in? Yes. Boom. Now that call's set, right? Now I know I'm there. And then I can potentially talk to 2 or 3 other people and say, hey, I'm in the building visiting Bill next Thursday. Can I get 5 minutes? And, oh, I'm really busy. Well, how about meet me in the lobby, right? And they're like, okay, sure. I'll meet you in the lobby for 5 minutes. And now I've got 2 calls, right? And I haven't even left the building in a lot of cases when I'm doing this, right?
On that point, sir, just to make a comment, I love that example though, because I had a VP. This is years ago, and he was great with getting on a message and just sticking with the message. And so one of the themes that he was on for a period of time was, book a meeting from a meeting, and then translated that into an acronym, BAM FAM. And I was like, BAM FAM, it sounds it sounds so kind of dumb, but it got stuck in your head, right? Yeah. And so people would reps would roll their eyes. Here's BAM FAM. But you know what? You know what they're thinking? Book a meeting from a meeting.
Yeah, well, I actually do that acronym thing a lot. I love that. And I'm always making them up. And of course, they evolve over time in some cases, but I just love acronyms and BAM FAM. That's awesome. But yeah, I do that. I do that a lot. And being resilient, team player, stuff like that, and always be continuous learning, right? Like that kind of a thing. I always try to stay at the forefront. Like I'm a geek, but only to like a certain level. Like I'm just sort of like a greedy geek, I like to call it, in the sense that I only want to get enough information so I can translate it into the business world, in a meaningful way that's sort of revenue generating. I don't like to learn things just for the sake of learning them in a sense. Like I'm not going to become a PhD level on any kind of product technology or subject matter, but I try to be well-versed in all aspects, from marketing concepts, new things, new sales techniques, and, new sales tools that are available, the latest accounting and ERP type tools and things for your business. They, and not sort of, have to be reliant on others just for basic knowledge. Right. And so continuous learning for me is important. Yeah.
Before we jump into the topic, I wanted to let you know that we just launched a monthly drawing for one of our insulated high-tech Freedom tumblers. Now, I've been sending these out as a thank you gift to each of our guests, and the response has been great. Everyone has a full-size coffee cup, a Yeti, or whatever brand that they might use, but not everybody has the small tumbler that you can put your wine or beverage of choice in. And they're great for the deck, beach, camping, or just keeping your drink warm or cold. Now, I'm not selling these, but I am excited about them. So we decided to offer these up to the loyal podcast listeners by doing a monthly drawing. So if you're interested, go to hightechfreedom.com/mug, that's MUG, and you'll see a picture of the tumbler and you can enter. We'll just collect your name, phone number, and email. And if you do win, we'll then follow up and ask for your mailing address so we know where to send it. If you don't win, your name stays in, so you don't need to re-enter. You touched on the point about smart learning, greedy learning, basically focusing on the stuff that matters the most in order to really move the kind of the sales productivity process along. And I know actually, this is a while ago, but I think back to when I was a new rep, I really struggled with this idea that I felt like, I was younger, so I felt maybe a little insecure, but I felt like I had to learn it all to really do a good job in front of the customer. And eventually, I kind of connected the dots. It's like, I've got people, if I need to go deep, right? There's engineers that'll go do that for me. What matters is what's going to resonate with the customer? What can I connect back to some business value? What story can I tell to get the conversation going, to start to uncover some of the unstated or sort of hidden pain points that they're not necessarily talking about, latent pain, if you will.
Right.
And I think that's, that is one of the hardest things reps deal with in a highly technical sales world is, your SaaS offering may have like 40 great things it can do, but what's the one that matters to that customer today? That's what you need to go focus on. In fact, I had a rep, a funny guy. He was a number one rep one year, number two another year. He hated going to the internal training because, hey, I'll learn this when it becomes relevant to my deal. And to his credit, he was so laser focused on the deals and then learning what he needed to know to progress that deal. And it worked for him.
That's the basis behind greed-based learning, the chapter in my book, Greed-Based Learning. Everyone's like, what does that mean, greed-based learning? What do you mean being greedy and whatever? And it's all about learning the technology at the exact moment that you need it to make money so that your greed kicks in. And people are like, I don't know, how does that work? That doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, okay, well, let me give you an example. When was the last time you bought a car, right? And I mean, I'm not a car guy, but I drive a car. I have a nice car now and I like it and I love it and whatever. But I don't particularly know anything about it per se, except for every 4 years when I get a new one, right? And when I get a new one, for some reason, I'm able to give my wife a litany of technical specs that pertain to 3 or 4 of the top vehicles, depending upon my age and budget at that time of whether the Ford, Chevy, or Chrysler's, which one's the best, all the features, the engine, the braking, the torque, the this, the that, And then, of course, now I'm convinced here to let me get a Mercedes or a BMW, right? But nonetheless, I'm able to instantly absorb all these facts and sort of sell my wife on which one I want and why it's so important we get the Mercedes. And then, of course, I promptly forget it all later. Once I've gotten the car I want, I move on and to the next thing. And now it's I don't have one of these, but if it was a jet ski or a boat or something like that, I'd know why the Yamaha was better than the Bombardier or and I apply that same idea to, hey, this instrument here, we don't sell a lot of them, but this guy's interested in it. And I'll call the FAE, the application engineer, and I say, look, what's the top 5 things that I just need to know across the top so that I can just sort of sound intelligent? And as we get deeper, I'll bring you into the conversation, right? And you do that. And because, there's lots and lots of money on the line, for some reason, I find myself able to be remember it and absorb it. And also the same thing where the technique kicks in is when you're interested in a football game, with the difference between when you do or don't have $5 riding on it, right? Like I actually don't watch a lot of football. I do go to Canadian football games, but there's not as many as in the US. But I mean, if I have $5 riding on the game, I'm glued to the set. I know every play that's happening, every mistake that gets made, and it really works well when you have a lot of products to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Especially in a bigger company. I could see how that makes sense. Well, Glenn, you also, when talking about what makes reps great, you talked about resilience. And, sometimes I think that is not talked about enough because it's not all great, right? You're going to have really tough times. You're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to be down. I mean, what are some of the things you've done or maybe you've seen other reps do over the years to really bounce back from a tough time in a sales process or a quarter or even a year?
Yeah, so the whole resilience thing is built into sort of the part of my philosophy that I shared with you when we were talking before about being a pleasure to do business with always. And that means even when you've lost the deal, right? Or or when you're struggling for, an economy or a quarter or something, a year or what have you, right? A lot of people, they've experienced it where the salesman's nice until he's not getting the deal, right? And then he doesn't become so nice. But then you're disinclined to ever want to call that person again, for something else, right? And I always try to be a pleasure to do business with my customers, regardless of the outcome. And so how do I act resilient in the face of losing? I've had customers where, hey, I'm sorry, we have a corporate contract with vendor A. And I mean, yes, your box is a bit better, but, on the margin, we have to give them first crack at all business to get our rebates and our this and our that, whatever. And it's like, okay. And I mean, now if I figure that out halfway through the deal, I'm going to recuse myself from all activity from that point forward. It's like, you need a quote? Fine, we'll send you a quote. Have a nice day, click by. And I'm not mad about it I'm nice. I get the quote person to send them the quote. But if I know they're buying brand A and I'm just keeping them honest, then what I do is while the salesman for brand A is working on getting his deal, I go to his next customer and I go and get that deal before he has a chance to get there. because he can't be in two places at one time, right? So the moment I realize things are not going my way, I try to remove myself from that situation and cut my losses and go to the next deal where I can focus some positive energy on, where I can be positive about the deal because it's new, right? And I have a chance of winning it. And as the more closer I get to winning it, the more I dig into it. But the moment I figure out I'm going to lose it, it's a finite moment in time where you actually know. But what I don't do is fly the engineer in from the factory to help get the deal when I know I'm losing it, right? Those things never work, right? And so I save that money, and then I go and I find the next available customer and I focus on that. That's one of the ways I'm resilient. The other thing is that when you're having a bad quarter or something like that, the number one way to improve your mental health and your state of mind is actually to go visit customers. But it's counterintuitive, because salesmen work into this negative cycle of sort of being stuck at home, feeling depressed and, no one's buying anything or whatever. And that's not true. It's categorically impossible that no one's buying anything, right? And, if something's down 50%, well, then 50% of them are still buying, right?
Right.
And so the best place to be when you're a salesperson is in front of customers. So even when your body's telling you, hey, go be depressed, the best thing you can do is go make another sales call. And and that's some of the ways I act resilient in the face of the challenging times. And so if it's a one deal, I go find the next deal and I focus on that, and if it's a bad quarter or something like that, I focus on ways and means of staying in front of customers, and one of my little rules I love sharing in the book as well is called always ask for a mini tour. So when I get to the company, I'm saying, oh, can you give me a little mini tour? And they're like, what's the mini tour? I go, it's a tour that's mini. I just want to see your new lab, your new warehouse, your new facility, your new production yard, your new yard, your new, whatever it is you sell, right? It doesn't matter, right? A lot of times I talk about forklifts and tow motors and stuff and selling to warehouse managers and, show me the new warehouse, show me the new loading docks, whatever. Get me in and show it to me, because on the way to the mini tour of that little part of their building, you're going to see the competitors' products. Whose t-shirts are they wearing with the logo? Whose coffee cups are on the desks? And you get to practice one of my other favorite rules, which is never forget a face. Where when you're in your car waiting to come into the lobby to not sit down, because we never sit in the lobby, right? You do what I call remembering people's faces. So you go through your phone, you go to this company, Acme Consulting or whatever. You say, hey, I know there's 4 people there that I've met. Sally, that's the redhead, right? Bob, that's the short guy. Sam, that's the tall guy. Whatever it is you can, and you go to their face and you remember, you pull it from your old term memory to your front memory, so that when you're walking if you bump into those people and they say, hey, Glenn, good to see you, you don't have that momentary lapse where they know you forgot their name. Right? You want to have it instantly on the top of your tongue. Sally, how's it going? And they remember that. And the next time they see you, they go, you know what, Glenn, you're always a pleasure to do business with. That's what they say, right? And even when they don't give you the order, they're happy to see you because you don't make them feel uncomfortable, right? So
yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple really great points there. And I've always loved that, when you're walking from the lobby to the meeting room, or you take a detour and you go on a little mini tour like that, besides the people that you see, also that hallway kind of casual conversation that you have, it seems like the barrier goes down when you're sitting at that conference room table and you're having a serious business discussion. It totally changes when you're just kind of chit-chatting in the hallway, and you could pick up little things, maybe work in a question. And then, in our world, especially, as we shift more to software, you don't see this as much, but, when we were selling, let's say, hardware and boxes and so on, you're walking down the hall and what is that stack and that pile of the competitors' boxes right there? It's like, we didn't know we were at risk.
Exactamundo. That's what I mean, right? And you're not going to see that until you get behind the lobby doors and into the building, right? And
I love that. Well, you also touched on something about the I'm sorry, I lost the question.
That's okay. You said something that I wanted to key on, so maybe you'll remember it while I just tell you the quick story, which is when you're walking through the hall and you're sort of having this less stressed conversation or what have you, like you said. I have another chapter I love in the book called Implied Familiarity Also Breeds Contempt, right? And where, I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, but it's called familiarity breeds contempt, right? Where hyper familiarity with someone can actually cause you to, like, people's, like, you chew too loud, you snore too loud, like those things make people feel contemptuous, right? And but those are obvious and what have you. So, but what I learned was through a hard lesson was implied familiarity also breeds contempt. So the story was, the guy had this photo behind his desk and he was holding like a fish, right, with another man. And they were all bragging about this fish thing in the photo kind of thing, right? I'm like, oh, you're fisherman, and like, maybe we should go fishing sometime or something like that, right? And the guy turns around and he's like, oh my God. He goes, I forgot that photo was even there. He goes, that's my ex-father-in-law, of my wife. We're divorced now, divorced from hell. I hated that guy. I hate fishing. Jesus, reaches up, grabs the photo, tosses it in the garbage. And now I brought back all these negative thoughts to this guy because I implied that I was familiar with him enough to ask him to go fishing, instead of saying, what's the story behind the fishing photo, right? And he's like, oh, damn, that's old. Chuck it, right? Yeah. And just move on, right? And so, it's always good not to be overly familiar. Let's go golfing. Let's do this. Let's do that. Like, you need to genuinely figure out what people are like before you make those overtures, right? And go ahead. So.
No, that's a great point. You talked a little bit about getting to know your customer and staying engaged even when there's not a deal. And I think the example I was going to give was, I worked with this rep one time, and God, he was such a great guy, just a good, genuine human being. And he was at a football game with his kid, an NFL game. I think it was a 49ers game. And the customer was talking to his son, who was, I don't know, let's say middle school, maybe 8th grade. And the customer says, kid, what I love about your dad? He calls me when we're not buying anything.
Right.
And this guy just, he truly valued those relationships. But kind of flip it around. He spent a lot of time to make that happen. I mean, it's not like you can just, it takes work to continue to nurture those relationships, the coffees, lunch, a dinner here and there, a phone call. Prospecting isn't always cold call prospecting. Sometimes it's just prospecting back to the people that you've talked to, just to check in. And, keep that familiarity going. So that they like golf, and then you can offer up something that's a little bit more intentful,
right,
versus just randomly throwing out stuff.
Yeah. So how do you do that? I don't know if you're going to ask me that question.
Well, let's talk about it.
So how does one do that? Right. Well, so I start small, right. And the rule for that is that I apply is something in your hand and something in your mind. Right. And so when I show up to a customer, I always have something in my hand and something in my mind. Right. And so a lot of times, and I'll get to how I stay in touch in a second, but I mean, if I'm showing up to a customer, maybe it's a quote or literature or something like that I'm handing to them so that I can, for the basis of the meeting, and I have something in my mind, talk about the deal, look at the quote, what are you thinking, blah, blah, blah. But oftentimes what I've also got in my hand or in my pocket really is a low cost trinket of the moment. I'm very big on trinkets of but and also spending the time finding, interesting and high quality trinkets. Like we have this 6-way pen that's a level, it's a ruler, it's a pen, it's a soft iPad thingamajigger. And I mean, we buy these by the thousands, right? We also have, we have new corporate colors now, they're blue, but we have the screwdriver, right? And I always have things like that. We also have mouse pads and things like that. And so what I'll do is I'll have a stack of those, and I'll say, hey, look, I also wanted to touch base with Jack, the guy who at the baseball game, right, or football game, and could you swing me by his desk? And I just want to drop off the pen and and say hello, no problem. He can walk me out, and then get Jack to take me to Sally. Sally takes me to Sam. Sam takes me to Bob. And I drop them off, and I'm just, and then that's how I do it in a small way, a measured way, because I can't take everyone out to dinner. I can't be out to dinner every night or lunch every day. And then, you have to use your best sort of prospecting skills just to inquire if it's just a hello, or if it's, hey, any problems you're working on today that, have my name on it, that kind of a thing. Right. And, and I mean, through body language and rapport, I'm always like implying that I'm never a nuisance, right? I'm hyper focused on not being a pain in the ass and not being difficult or hard to get along with, right? I can instantly tell where I am in the guy's psychological moment of the day. This guy's too busy. Here's a pen. Gotta go. I'll see myself out unless you need to walk, whatever. No, see yourself out. Okay, bye. Have a nice day. And I'm out of there, right? If he's calm and relaxed and drinking a coffee, maybe I get him for a couple of minutes. I can ask him to take me to Sally, whatever, right? And then, with other customers where there's more money involved and things like that, I try to create repeat practices, where I'm always in a building in a certain gate, and so I have the opportunity to see those people. And then certain customers warrant lunches and things where there's a true rapport. I hate going to lunch with someone where I don't have rapport, and then it's very difficult, right? The conversation. And, you're trying to make random small talk. You don't actually have any rapport. So you don't know if he's a fisherman or a golfer or a baseball player or, a hunter. So I'm not going to take random people out to lunch as a precursor to thinking they're going to buy from me or whatever, right? For me, lunches and things like that are rewards for past friendly behavior, and, they're genuine, right? And
I assume there's some people that you like that you want to take to lunch. And so, it's more enjoyable for you. Well, Glenn, man, we could talk for a while, and I'll definitely pick up your book. I like how you think. If I guess last question as we get close to wrapping up, if you were to go back and give your younger self some earlier career advice, I mean, you've had a good, long, productive career. What's one thing you would tell your younger self to maybe think about or do differently or do more of?
Well, there's a chapter in the book which I always love to tell everybody at this exact moment, which is the title is "You Only Get Forever to Make Another Impression." And so often people remember what their mother said, which is don't forget, son, you only get one chance to make a first impression, right? That's true. But also you get to make a second impression and a third impression. And so the story I reflect on in the book is the worker that, where the sales manager coming in and he walks by the desk and he sees the guy was on Facebook and he hears your footsteps. And as you're walking by, he alt tabs to the CRM, right? And you're like, oh, what's going on, John? Oh, yeah, just checking on contacts, whatever, right? And, then a week later, you're just happy walking by his desk again. This time he's on Instagram. He alt tabs over to the CRM. Oh, just busy prospecting. That guy is now forever a bum, right? And so the rule is that for young people that are building a career is always be building your career. There is no off. There's no off switch. There's no off button. You know what I mean? Obviously, if you're on lunch, you're more than welcome to do whatever you want in the cafeteria, go out to lunch, do whatever. When you're at your desk, you are their best employee at all times. When you hear the boss walking by, stop them and ask them a question, which makes them seem like you're constantly working the best deal for the business at that time. Don't look at your Facebook at work. Don't look at Instagram at your work. Don't load it on your machines and whatever. Don't do it. Because when you make those impressions, they're forever. They're lasting impressions on the people. And a great example of where you can best display it is at trade shows. That's where you see the true character of your people, is at trade shows, because there's lull times in trade shows, right? And this isn't that people are exceptionally bad or anything. It's just that the alternative of the people that do it well stand out so much. And so essentially what I always tell people, what I learned was the trade show that time goes low. The boss is there. The FAEs are there, right? The equipment's all set up. I go to each FAE and I go, look, teach me the top 5 things on this latest product. What do I need to know? I don't sit down in the booth, right? I never sit in the lobby. I never sit in the booth, right? If I run out of FAEs to talk to and the boss doesn't have any more mentoring to do or whatever, then I go stand in the aisle and I pull people in. And so when it comes to measuring what's going on, the boss is like, oh my God, that Glenn guy, he's in the aisle pulling people into the booth. And Jack is over there sitting on a seat. If this guy makes twice what that guy makes, this is the guy I need to promote, right? It's always about making an impression that means that you're the next choice that guy wants to make. When it's time to put the next big account to a person, he's going to give it to you. When there's a promotion due, he's going to give it to you. You're going to be the front runner. And people challenge me on this or whatever, but I've seen it work in my career. I've seen it work in other people's careers. And through those techniques, I've got a couple examples in the book where there's people with no high school diploma that drove a tow motor for a living that are now making well over 100K selling high technology products with literally no education and one of the top salesmen in their company. Just through a series of mentoring and following rules like you only get forever to make another impression, greed-based learning, how to learn the products, how to stay on top of things, right? And so that's my advice, is follow that rule.
Yeah, that's great advice. A little bit of hustle, a little bit of activity, and consistently.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Glenn, I know that you're getting ready to launch a new podcast called Profit Powerhouse. Is it live yet?
Yeah, it should have been live actually today or last night, and I actually hadn't checked this morning, but like this week it goes live, and the interviews starting this week, and it should be published. There's an inaugural episode, and then they should start coming live next week, and so I'm excited about that. I've been on this side of the microphone for a while, and now I get to interview people like you.
Yeah, well, you'll do great. So my understanding is you're interviewing entrepreneurs, sharing their expertise, but their stories, their journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if somebody would like to reach out to you and get in touch, what is the best way to connect up?
So my website is glennpoulos.com, and from there I can go to LinkedIn and type in my name. And LinkedIn's really the fastest way to get a hold of me. You can message me on LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot, and that's where I'm most active. But if there's you can contact me on the website as well. And I'm always happy to talk to anyone that has any questions, comments, or wants to talk about anything. So,
all right. And we'll put the LinkedIn link in the show notes. Glenn, really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks again for joining us today. To get more sales and real estate tips, you can subscribe to our newsletter at hightechfreedom.com. You can also join our private Facebook and LinkedIn group that is exclusively for sales professionals. If you found a nugget of good information in the podcast, please subscribe, give us a positive rating, and write a review. If there is a topic that you would like us to cover in the future, please send us a note through our website at hightechfreedom.com. Until next week, make this your best week ever.